If you follow competitive Fortnite at all, Bizzle's probably a name you've heard before. He's been involved in the scene since the beginning, with consistently high placements in nearly every tournament he plays in. Currently, Bizzle is Fortnite's top esports winner, with over $500,000 earned. So far. He's also already qualified for the Solo World Cup Finals in New York. He did that all the way back in week 1. Since he's already qualified, Bizzle just sort of messes around during the semifinals each remaining week. He even goes as far as trying to qualify for the Sunday finals with no guns. That's right, no ARs, no shotguns, no drum gun, only utility, throwables, and vehicles. I mean, it's totally crazy, right? Most of us can't even guarantee a win in a normal pub match with every item at our disposal, let alone a World Cup game against top players. But Bizzle's got this game figured out to a T. His skill and knowledge of the game allows him to know exactly what's needed in each scenario to place highly, and in some cases, even win the game. In his 9-week run, he's won 3 of his no-weapon games. Just think about how insane that is for a minute. And don't forget to head over to ProGuides.com to cast your vote in our various Fortnite tier lists. What's the best utility in the game? You tell us. I'm your host, Dan, and today we're going to analyze some Week 9 games from Bizzle to see what we can learn from his no-gun runs. Mainly, we'll be seeing the importance of positioning and rotational skills, since he won't be getting many kills. Let's get right into Game 1. Let's start at the beginning. We're going to take a look at how Bizzle takes advantage of the baller, and how important a baller is when you're playing a no-gun run. We'll also find out how to keep that ball safe when you have no weapons to defend yourself with. Bizzle plans to drop at unnamed baller camp north of pressure plant. He's chosen the spot for the baller, of course, don't we all? And usually, he secures them from the start. While landing in his first game, however, he sees a purple vending machine with a launch pad by the hot springs. There's a singular baller that has a 50% of spawning there. He does a double take to make sure the baller is there before deciding to land. We'll be talking about the baller a bit more later, but just know this for now. Without weapons, Bizzle's early game relies heavily on baller usage. With it, he can more efficiently loot and farm the outskirts of the map. Also, he sort of needs one in order to avoid fights with other players. During these games, one strategy Bizzle uses a lot is to visit already looted areas of the map. He does this mainly so he can pick up any items or materials that were left behind by other players. With his baller, Bizzle remains confident that he won't take any storm damage doing this. He's also less likely to encounter players in these areas since they generally would have rotated out by now. So these odd rotation paths end up being quite a safe option. Let's jump ahead to the 4th circle. Bizzle's loadout is in a pretty good state for the late game. He has mats, a launch pad, impulses, a glider ready ploy, and heals. He also has 3 stinks, which are going to get some use toward the end. However, despite all the materials and rotation items, the most important object in his possession is still the baller. Being able to bring a baller into the late game gives you a huge advantage. It's where the OP-ness of the baller shows the most. Most players tend to avoid shooting at ballers during the endgame since they're usually preoccupied with rotating themselves. Even if they aren't rotating, the risk-reward for shooting at ballers is way off, to the point where it's usually detrimental for the shooter. So Bizzle chooses to rotate when it's safe, setting up a new 1x1 in each new zone in order to protect his ball. One thing to point out here is how Bizzle protects his baller. It's already at low HP, so he needs to make sure nobody finds and destroys it. Only having wooden walls as his cover gives opponents an easier opportunity to spot and break it, thus ruining Bizzle's easy rotations. To prevent this, he makes sure to use brick, since it's stronger material than wood when fully built. He then repositions the baller and puts a metal cone over it for added protection. It seems silly, but sometimes this can be the difference between losing your baller and keeping it. The next circle pops up and Bizzle isn't safe. He assesses the situation around him, planning his next move. He looks for what targets are threats and which aren't, using that information to decide his rotation path. There's only one possible threat Bizzle notices in the wooden 1x1 biome. Once he sees another baller roll past unharmed, he realizes it's safe and decides to move on. Waiting to rotate is often useful since you can gather more information for your rotation. There's also the idea of waiting so you don't get targeted first. Being the first to rotate can often lead to you getting focused. If you rotate after others, the focus will already be on them, making it much safer for you. So he begins to rotate. He first tries to hide in a cornfield, but he was unaware that his ball breaks corn, so he immediately heads for an area that was just covered up 5 seconds ago by the storm. With the quick speed of the baller, he can choose any of his free real estate to set up another box. Bizzle keeps his baller and survives another rotate. Here's one thing we'd like to point out about the next rotation. You'll often see Bizzle trying to use his environment to hide in when he's using a baller. It's mostly so he goes unnoticed and doesn't get shot, but there's also the choice to save some mats by not building cover instead. His baller does eventually go down, so he's got to start building now. Bizzle's worried about the people on the high ground. He extends his tunnel out more, making sure he's not falling behind on rotating. Bizzle notices the one guy that got shot down is close to him. Knowing he's going to step out onto his floor, he pulls off a really slick floor edit trap kill. This is why it's always useful to make sure you walk out on a piece you own during the endgame. At this point, the rest of the game is a joke for Bizzle. The remaining players eventually kill each other, leaving the 1v1. The strategy here with the stink bombs is just to get a tag and win the heal game. He ends up not even needing the slurp since he didn't take any unnecessary storm damage, and because of the high ground advantage, his opponent can't touch him, and just like that, Bizzle wins his first match of the weekend with no guns. Bizzle just showed us how important positioning is for success. His main focus is just making it to the next safe zone alive and to make sure he gets high ground for the ending. Always plan and make your moves in advance. That way, when things go wrong, you have more time to react. Let's watch how Bizzle dominates while in high ground this game. We'll also see the strength of the baller once again, and find out even more ways to protect yourself when you have no weapons. In Bizzle's second game, he plays the first 20 minutes or so very similar to how he played the last game. He's doing baller things and people aren't even shooting at him. Unfortunately, the zone's getting a bit tight and he does take some storm damage. This is the signal to let his baller go, despite it being at full HP. You don't want to accidentally bump into the storm and get stuck behind a bunch of old builds, so he hooks up to the high ground and takes it, just like that. The high ground is super valuable, and Ballers players are often capable of grabbing it for free. Once Bizzle grabs it, he keeps it. Multiple times throughout, he will place excess floor or cone pieces where he thinks an opponent may try to build or make an edit play. He even hears an RPG start to reload. Fearing a rocket coming his way, Bizzle drops down a layer and covers the area with some cones. This way, the opponent can't easily rocket him anymore. The match finishes in a sort of anticlimactic way. The RPG player just blows themselves up, and Bizzle snags the last limb with the stink bomb. But hey, a win's a win. Knowing when to get rid of a baller and doing it in an advantageous way is what allowed Bizzle to win his second game here. Oftentimes, players make the mistake of not looking at the bigger picture any longer here, and Bizzle may have not been able to secure the high ground, so he took the opportunity and it paid off. Bizzle may have lost this round, but he's also going to show us some great rotational strategies that help us bounce back. There was a good chance he was going to get 3 in a row, so let's find out how he did it. As his points go up, so does the difficulty of his opponents. Bizzle can't keep winning like this forever, right? Well, on his first loss, it wasn't even really the skill of the opponents that got him killed. However, an unfortunate event occurs which causes him to lose. So, Bizzle gets too close to a player he didn't know was there and gets shot at. He's trying to avoid players as much as possible in the odd chance that one of them decides to break his baller. In this case, the opponent really has no reason to shoot at Bizzle. They're both not in zone, Bizzle poses no threat, and there's no storm surge active. The only reason would be pure aggression, just wanting to kill, which is fine, it's just not normal player behavior in this situation. So because of this maniac, Bizzle loses his baller. He disengages the fight and heads toward Frost Flights just in case he can secure a leftover baller. As expected, there aren't any left, so he used this opportunity to scavenge for utility. Now, this next zone is pretty awful for Bizzle. Unfortunately for him, there's a quad crasher left by, and he knows how to use it. He holds boost going upwards and then does a flip, resetting in the upward position when he's ready to boost again. Being able to pull off really good quad crasher rotations takes a lot of practice with the vehicle, but that practice is definitely worth it, since it's one of the best long distance rotation methods in the game. Eventually, when he gets to the center circle, Bizzle hops off the quad and sets up a 1x1. Center zone here gives him closer access to the next potential circle. Although, you've got to be careful about setting up center zone in the later, smaller circles. Since the players are more cramped together, you're more likely to get targeted from multiple angles if you set up in the center. It's sort of a trade-off between better positioning for next zone, or less likely to be targeted. Toward the end of this game, Bizzle goes for an impulse off polar into what should be a glider pullout low to the ground. It seems he accidentally pulls his glider way too early, which causes his death. Pulling out glider ready ploy too high up is often a death sentence in these endgames. Your movement is slow, predictable, and you can't skydive. In competitive endgames, you generally don't want to go for ready ploys that last for more than a couple seconds, as they very well may be your last. The last game we're going to look at is his final one of the night. In this one, Bizzle displays the importance of vehicles and efficient item usage. It's a good one too, pushing him to above 50 points earned for the night. The early game plays out similar to the others. He acquires a ball and a pretty good kit. Unlucky for him, however, there's a surprise enemy on top of the sky platform. Because of this, he loses his free endgame rotations. He heads into the snow area and towards Frosty to farm up some more mats. A supply drop spawns close to him, which he definitely wants to get. If a supply drop is landing close to you, the equipment it can drop can often be game-changing. Nearby supply drops are definitely worth going for in most cases. At this point, Bizzle has no baller and is way off from optimal positioning, so he uses what he can. This time, it's a driftboard. It's surprising he doesn't get hit more often while riding it, but it somehow manages to bring him center circle pretty unharmed. When he sets up, a nearby opponent starts throwing stinks. Knowing that 3 come in a stack and only 2 have been thrown so far, he waits to use the campfire so it doesn't get wasted. Just like we said earlier, you're more likely to be focused in the center of zone. However, Bizzle manages to survive the attack just fine and gets circle favor in the next zone. He then heals up and plants his next move. Just like with the baller, Bizzle makes sure to protect his vehicle behind stronger material. He greatly values their rotation abilities, and you'll see why right here. He's able to jump across the entire area and make it to the next safe zone without having to use any materials or items. He ends up needing his mobility items later on as well, so the decision to bring and use the driftboard definitely helped him to get a better placement. Jumping ahead a bit, Bizzle's used his launch pad and 2 shadow bombs so far to help him move with the safe zone. He pops his rift and makes a genius call while landing.
goes down, it's going to be perfect. He's going to drop. Come on, drop.
Basically, Bizzle knew that when a player needs to build down in order to stay at an effective level, there's a small window when rifting to quickly land and yoink the high ground. So he does just that and takes over height. He manages to hold the high ground until a top 3 situation, where he eventually gets contested by somebody with more material. Bizzle runs out of mats, and without any weapons, he has no real way of defending himself. So he drops down in an attempt to survive longer using the other player's builds. There's not much you can do here, sadly. Still though, another great placement and a game well played. Bizzle's loadout was bone dry by the end of the match. The decision to use the drift board a couple times to position in the safe zone really helped conserve his utility. We know the importance of height, and we saw him take it with the baller earlier. This time, he did it with the rift. These type of efficiencies Bizzle manages to find and use are what helps him play so well. We were honestly just totally blown away by watching Bizzle do so well without any guns. It just goes to show how there's a lot more to this game than finding good weapons and winning fights. Knowing how to properly position and rotate may be the most important skills in competitive Fortnite, and we truly hope you learned a thing or two in that area from our video. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and we'll see you around soon.